So you have to work on your resume. Either somebody told you, maybe a recruiter said, hey, there's some work you have to do here, or you're just not hearing back from positions where you know you meet all the requirements. You know you've got the experience, and something's just not connecting. Well, today I really want to walk you through the process that I take clients through. So you'll get to hear the 5 steps we work through in the coaching session, which is the most valuable part of the process. But I'll also share what I do to prepare for that first session and what I do between sessions and after our session so that what my clients end up with is a polished resume. Now, I recently had someone reach out to me and say, hey, are you still coaching? Because I could really use a conversation with someone. I could really use the help on my resume and in my job search. And I thought I would share the honest answer that right now I am not actually taking new clients. However, sharing this information is my way of giving back and helping you to put your resume together. And every other week, this is how I'm continuing to help you in your job search. And so I hope that this is incredibly helpful for you because it has been incredibly helpful for my clients. So let's get into it. I'm going to walk you through the entire process. Hey there, this is the Uncommon Career Podcast, and my name is Patricia Ortega. I'm your host, and I'm here with you every other week to make sure that your job search is a little bit quicker, a little bit smoother, and really, if we work things right, to make sure that your job search is actually enjoyable, that you start to see the reaction from recruiters and from hiring leaders, and you start to really knock it out of the park in your interview. So if you're in your job search, you want to make it a better experience, then stick with me. And today, what we're talking about is the 5-step process to create a great resume. This is the exact process I use with my clients. So let's jump into it. The very first thing that I do is I ask my clients, hey, I'm going to need 3 to 5, if you have time, up to 10 job postings that are very, very similar to the work that you want to do. These, in a perfect world, would be all for the same function at the same type of company. So if you're thinking, I want to be a project manager in CPG, that's consumer packaged goods, right? Then you want to go out there and get 3 to 5, up to 10 job postings for project manager in CPG. Now, if you know that you want to work at the larger companies, the Fortune 500s, for example, then make sure all your postings are from those Fortune 500s. If you know that you want to work at small, independent, sustainable brands, for example, then you want to make sure and get job postings from those types of companies. Now, it's also possible that you may not see all the postings that you want, or you may have job postings that are no longer hiring for that position, but you saved it because it sounded amazing 3 months ago. You know what? That's okay. They don't have to be current. So gather your top 3, 5 up to 10 postings, and then here's what I do. I like to use AI, but not to draft your resume. That is one of the worst ways to use AI, is to just kind of plop it in there and see what resume you get back, because you're going to get something back that is extremely generic. But instead, I use AI to analyze every single one of those postings one at a time. Now, I have a specific prompt, but I can give you the kind of the gist of it here. So essentially what you're doing is you're telling it to act as a master resume writer, and you're also, in that same prompt, having it analyze individually and then across all of your postings. So at the end, what you get is a bit of a fact sheet that says, according to these 10 postings, or according to these 5 postings, here are the top 5 to 10 competencies that need to be on your resume. Here are the top 5 to 10 technical skills and methodologies and specific keywords that need to be on your resume. Here are the top 1, 3, or absolute maximum 5 core outcomes. I would really aim for 1 core outcome or 3 core outcomes that the hiring leader wants out of this position. And essentially what you're understanding throughout the whole fact sheet is, what are the key performance indicators that are going to tell the next hiring leader that you're an absolute rock star before you ever get into the interview. All right, so that is the pre-work to start developing the resume. The next step is for me and my client to meet in the first coaching session. And so here is the 5-step process. This is the most valuable part of the entire process, is when we're meeting, we're coaching through to figure out not only what are your achievements, but what are the right achievements. And then we get into the impact, and then we get into the metrics, which most everybody says, Right, but my job didn't include metrics. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that. Every single client says, but you don't understand. I don't have any metrics to show. And at this point, usually in the very beginning, my response would be, oh, okay, well, we'll try to do what we can because I wasn't sure if we'd be able to get metrics. After doing so many resumes, I'm like, I promise you, there's metrics. I've done so many of these and I've gotten the same concern at the beginning, but always we end up with too many metrics and then we get to choose the best ones. So if you have that concern, keep on listening for step one. We're going to start there. I'm going to walk you through the 5 steps. And by the end, you will have some metrics to put in your resume. Okay, so what is the very first step? Once myself and my wonderful client meet, let's pretend you and I are meeting. So if you and I meet on, say, Monday afternoon to start working on your resume, one of the first questions I'm going to ask you is, okay, wonderful. Now that we have your fact sheet, I'm going to put this on the screen so you're able to see it and just kind of get a sense of the keywords, the frame of mind we're in, the type of work we're talking about, even though you have been in this space for years, likely because you've got the experience. Oftentimes, the way we talk about our work when it's just kind of off the cuff is very different than the way we talk about our work when we are immersed in the hiring leader's mind. And so, by putting that fact sheet in front of you, or what the AI generated to help you get a sense of your top 10 skills, etc., it basically places you somewhat in the mind of the hiring leader. What are the key words that are going to resonate with them? Now, we don't have to use those keywords yet. We don't have to use those competencies yet. But right now, it's just to say, this is a space we're talking about. There's no need to do anything right now. Let's say it's you and me on that call. I'm like, there is no filter here. Nothing has to sound fancy. You're just kind of talking to me. Think of it as a gal pal on a coffee chat, and you're just sharing with me. Okay, so step one is to find your achievements. And I help you find your achievements by asking questions like, how did you make a really big difference? Like, you came into this position, and chances are 50 other people could have come into this position, but you came into this position and you left it better than when you came. How did that happen? Like, what are some things that you think, well, if I wasn't there, XYZ would have totally fallen apart? Or here's another question I ask. What are you most proud of in that role? Like, what are you really excited about in terms of what you did there? And so when I ask that question in the beginning, it's like, oh, I'm not really sure, right? And you know what? That's okay. Even if right now you're like, I don't know, I know I just kind of did my work. Totally fine. Because what happens in our conversation, whether it's in coaching or even when you're journaling or trying to kind of sit down and brainstorm, in the beginning, it's going to feel like you don't have an answer or like your answer is just kind of surface level. Sometimes people say that their answers sound kind of dead, like there's no life behind it. Totally normal. Keep going because what's happening is you're warming up your thought process. And so keep asking the question, and that's exactly what will happen. As my client, you would probably say, I'm not really sure. I'm like, okay, great. Let me ask you a few other questions. And I continue asking questions around that same line of thought. What are you most proud of? What was most exciting for you? What was your biggest challenge that you overcame there? What do people know you for? Or when did something that you were doing turn into a enterprise-wide, company-wide, campus-wide situation? Anyhow, all these questions are really for step one, finding your achievements. So we start off, it might feel surface level, it might feel cold. Just keep digging because eventually you are going to hit a spot when you're like, dang, I did have a big impact there. Let me tell you the top 3, 4, 5 major things that I did. And so as we get to those pieces, I jot those down as they're sharing with me. And I'm like, okay, great. Now, if you were to look at these top 3 or 4 accomplishments that we just talked through, which one do you believe is most relevant to the next position you are looking for? Right? Because there's a lot of things that we accomplish that are so amazing, but maybe 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5 or 1 out of 5 are going to be things that are really helpful for one particular career, but just not for the position you're going after. So Step number one is warm up with these questions of what are you most proud of and find your achievements. Once you have a running list of your achievements and you realize, yep, I pretty much got everything here from that position. Now, step two is to look over those, pick one achievement, think of the most relevant achievement to the next role you're interested in. And now we go deeper. Let's say you and I were on this call, I would then ask you questions like, well, I know this was impactful for you because it was one of these big achievements that came up, but tell me, how do you know this was impactful for the company? Oh, well, I don't know. Usually that's how it starts. I don't know. I just know that, my boss was really excited about it and, it was really successful, but I just don't have a number. Okay, great. Tell me what about it let you know it was successful? Right? So there is always something that tells us that a project or an initiative or a task was successful. And usually we can observe it. It was objectively successful. So we'll ask a bunch of questions along that line of questioning. What was observable? Was it that your boss made a comment? Let's get down the exact comment your boss made. Was it that you were recognized at an annual meeting? Okay, great. Exactly what was that recognition? Because in that, whether it's recognition that happens at some, award ceremony, whether it's comments from your boss or a different area, wing, or department or division, or whether it's understanding that, hey, our call center got significantly busier, or, our partnerships skyrocketed after that. Anything along those lines lets you know, okay, this made an impact. Okay, now that we have those pieces, we're starting to get closer and closer and closer to the metrics that we need. So now, step three is to begin to quantify that impact. Now, we'll start by quantifying the scope because that's super easy, right? Well, I don't want to say super easy, but more often than not, it's far easier to quantify scope. Like, for example, what was the budget that you had? Or how many people did you oversee as you project managed this initiative? Or maybe it was something as simple as what's the size of the campus if you work in at a university? Or what is the square footage of the facility that you ran? Whatever it might be, we're just going to find some metrics of scope. When you think about metrics of scope, think about what are some numbers that can show your hiring leader how big or small or complex of an organization you worked in. How large was your budget, etc. Okay. If you've had, three positions at one company, then you want like maybe one or two metrics of scope in each of those positions' experiences so that they can see that in the beginning you had maybe a budget of, the several thousands. Maybe in the second position you had a budget of several hundred thousands. Maybe in the third position you had a budget of several millions, right? So think about kind of how your metrics of scope are telling a story from your earliest position that's on your resume to your most recent. But the metrics of scope, again, are a little bit easier to come by. So, what we're really talking about here, though, is metrics of impact, is quantifying that. Let's get some numbers down that we can stand behind when we're in the interview, right? Because you want to be able to go in the interview and your hiring leader to say, tell me about this 30%. And for you to be able to explain how you arrived at that number in a way that they understand and in a way that you feel confident sharing. The way we do that is not by going for percentages. Percentages, think of it as the bonus. We're actually going to go for raw numbers. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, this is where the plan falls apart because I don't have raw numbers. I wasn't in that position too long, or I didn't capture those numbers, or I wasn't given those numbers. And you know what? That's okay because we don't need exact numbers. What we do need are numbers we can stand behind confidently and that give the hiring leader an idea of the work that you did. So let's get into the detail of this, right? Let's say, for example, that you had a partnership and you brought not only one partnership together, so you working with a business partner, maybe a counterpart in another company, but then you had this great idea that you also wanted to bring in a third partner from a completely different organization because you thought the synergy would really bring additional business to everybody involved and it would just be a win-win across the board. And let's say that you did that And you know that it was successful because the event that all three companies put together was the largest event of its kind. But you don't know the numbers. You don't know how much revenue was generated. You may not even know like how many people attended in total. This is where I would ask questions like, okay, so you know the event was the largest of its kind. Right then and there, that is in a sense kind of a metric. It may not be a number, but the fact that it's the largest ever is great because then my next question is, okay, was it twice as big? 5 times as big? Well, I don't really know how many times as big. And I'll say, okay, 100 times as big. And they'll say, no, definitely not. Okay, 10 times as big. Maybe. I'm like, all right, 5 times as big. Oh, definitely bigger than that. Okay, great. Let's say over 5 times as big. So what we're doing is we are trying to arrive at a number that is accurate enough that it is a genuine representation, but a number that is just under what it probably is so that you can remain really confident about talking about it and you never feel like you're exaggerating. I know that it's tempting to overinflate your numbers, but it may become a red flag for the employer if they know numbers in that space. But more importantly, your integrity is not worth any one job. It just isn't. Your integrity is something that you have developed over time. That's your character. That is your reputation. And so when you go into, an interview, being able to know that you are 100% honest and in fact, this is an underestimation, how amazing would it be to go into a room and the hiring leader says, "Hey, these numbers are pretty impressive, 5 times as much. Like you made an event, you made it exponentially bigger. You made it 5 times as big as the original event by working creatively with your partners. Tell me more about that." You can actually say, that's actually an underestimation. We were very conservative with those numbers, but I know that it was at least that big, if not bigger. And here's how I got there. Now you can share confidently the information. Now, other ways to make these calculations or get these estimates is to take a look at daily, weekly, or monthly or quarterly metrics that you are fairly comfortable in sharing. Metrics that you're like, oh yeah, I know we did at least, 5 of whatever it was. We closed at least 5 of these sales per week. I know we had at least 3 partnerships per month, right? Whatever that number is that you remember from just informal observation, you can then say, okay, if that's the case, then how many weeks are there in a year? Let's take out 4 weeks for vacation or whatever it might be, right? How many months are there in a year? And I was there for 2 years and it was consistent across those 2 years. So let's calculate. And we calculate the numbers. That's literally what we do in session. We'll calculate some of those numbers. We'll see what that end number comes out to. And then the client, right? If you and I are in this session, you're usually like, I don't know, that sounds like a lot. And I'm like, okay, tell me where the mistake is because we definitely want to be accurate. More often than not, you'll say, well, no, actually, that's pretty accurate. It's probably more than that if I'm really being honest. And I'm like, fantastic. That's exactly the place we want to be. We want to be in a place where when we make these types of calculations and estimations, you are, you know, really as accurate as you can be. And if anything, a little bit conservative so that you can be that confident sharing the information. Now, when you're thinking about your scope and your impact, again, I think I mentioned it earlier, but you sometimes might be tempted, like many of us are, to throw in a percentage. Think of the percentage as a bonus. First, calculate the raw numbers, and then if it's helpful to have a percentage, then you can translate that into a percentage, and then of course you'll decide where you're going to include percentages only. But in a perfect world, for most, if not all percentages, you would also have the raw numbers. Because let's be honest, if you went from 1 client to 2 clients, saying we had a 100% increase, it is accurate, but I don't know if it is, fully genuine. You know what I mean? So think about those pieces is if they saw the raw numbers behind this percentage, would this still be as impactful? And if it's wildly a different experience, then it might give you a hint that, hey, it's probably in full transparency best to put the raw numbers and then add the percentage as a bonus if we want. Okay, so step one, find your achievements by just really feeling like, what am I most proud of? Step two, pick what's most relevant to your next role and go deeper in terms of what's the observable impact of this achievement. Step three, quantify the scope. That's the easy part of the metric. And then quantify your impact, whether it's estimations, calculations, etc., using raw numbers. Okay, that is the heavy lifting. Now we can get into building the bullet. Here's where I do bring in some AI because we can wordsmith until the cows come home. And why do that when AI can build us three different bullets we can choose from and then start putting them together? And so part of what I do is I will take all the information, which by this time, you and I have been talking a solid 20, 30 minutes, and I've got anywhere from half a page to a page worth of information that I have just been typing away as you are talking and just really getting into the groove of the information that you're sharing. Okay, so now I take that information, you and I, pop it into AI. I've got a prompt. The gist of the prompt is, hey, you are a master resume writer and you draft 12 to 20 word bullets using all the keywords and all the information necessary from this fact sheet, right? It's pulling information from the 3, 5, or even 10 postings that you analyzed previously. And you're saying, okay, help me to bring in some of the relevant keywords and include all the metrics that I've already found. Do it in 12 to 20 words because that is ideal for a resume bullet. And it's going to give you multiple options. I can almost guarantee you, at least when you and I do it or when me and my clients do it, I can almost guarantee you none of those bullets will do your work justice. It's just AI. They will sound better than your current resume because your current resume likely doesn't have those metrics of transformation. It doesn't have those words of impact. It may or may not even have those amazing achievements that you didn't realize needed to go on your resume. So it's going to be exponentially better. However, when we look at those bullets, what we're really focusing on now is to say, okay, what information was really impactful that was missed because it's not surface level? Because AI really just kind of targets the surface level for the most part. So what we're looking for is what are the keywords we want to pull, right? What are the strong points we want to pull from what AI just gave us? But then what did AI miss? And it always misses something. A good example is you might have shared details on your cumulative budget was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what AI will do is it'll pull one, maybe the biggest one. Kudos to AI for pulling the biggest, most compelling metric, but it might pull that metric and put it into a bullet. But it's not going to explain that you had a progressively growing budget. And so those are the kinds of things that we want to capture in the bullet so that it doesn't sound like a generic surface level, very direct A to B kind of a bullet. And so we have it draft those bullets so that we can get those keywords in there, but then we do some more wordsmithing to get your bullet to as the highest impact it can be. And the other thing that it often does is it will put the metric towards the end. At least that's what it does for me. And so I always have to tell it front load the metric. And so as long as the metric is relevant or is the most relevant to your achievement, then that's going to make a huge difference. Even if the hiring leader only reads the first 6 words of that bullet, it's going to say impact, 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 impact. And once they have the attention of the hiring leader with the impact and the metric, then they can read the how, the methods, the skills, all of those pieces that are going to let them know that you know Scrum or Agile, or that you know a sales methodology, or that you have created a governing framework before. And then at the end of it, you can talk about more qualitative results as well. Okay. I know this has been a lot of information, but this is literally the process that I use, and it does take time. I'll meet with a client for roughly between 2 and 4 sessions, and these are 1 hour to 90-minute sessions. And what I've noticed is because we don't necessarily know what we don't know, we don't realize how much time it takes to develop a solid resume. And we think, okay, well, let's kind of hop together for an hour and tell me exactly what to change. But the parts that need to be added onto your resume aren't parts that are just at the top of our mind. The pieces that need to be added to the resume are the pieces that are deep in our experience that we haven't talked about or thought about in months, if not years. So, this is where the coaching comes in. And this is where your thought process of, okay, what did I do there? What was I most proud of? Why was I proud of it? There's something that I saw that made me proud. There's something that I saw that validated my experience that, yeah, this was a really successful project. What did I see? What was observable? And then how can I quantify that? Even if it means that I've got to make some calculations, as long as those calculations are accurate, then I can speak from that space in an interview and I can put that bullet in my resume. Okay, so I've gone on, we are at like 30 minutes nearly now. And so I just want to share that with you, right? You find your achievements, pick one, go deeper, quantify the scope, quantify the impact, build out the bullet using AI as your helper. And let's say that you have all your bullets for one specific role. I want you to step back because this is the part that I do after our session that often makes a big difference. So step back, step away from it for a day or two. Then come back to your resume or come back to the work that you've been doing and the bullets that you've been creating and ask yourself, do these 5 bullets that I came up with, do they reflect the most relevant work I've done in this position when it comes to the role that I'm interested in? That is number one. Nothing else supersedes that relevancy. Now that you say, yep, it's all highly relevant, the next question is, do these bullets also reflect the highest impact that I've had? And it's possible that you might need to just change a metric because you might read somewhere on there that you increase number of partners from 2 partners to 3 partners. And you're like, oh, that doesn't really feel really impactful. But those additional partners or that one additional partner led to 2 million in revenue growth. Now that is a better metric. And so this is where you're going through and you're saying, is this relevant? Number one. Number two, is every single bullet impactful? Okay, so number 3, ask yourself, when I look at these bullets, do they reflect the highest level of complexity of the work that I've done? So for example, maybe you did make 2 million in revenue through one partnership, but maybe the way the bullet is phrased makes it sound very serendipitous. Like, oh, this partner approached me and we just happened to make $2 million. It's impactful, but it doesn't give you the credit. It doesn't show that you have that strategic and complex skill set to be able to make this happen somewhere else, to replicate it. So, this is where you may want to change the wording a little bit to reflect what you did. And let me just take a second to say that very, very often we don't take credit for our thinking. And I need you to take credit for your thinking. So, for example, maybe a partner did come to you. And so you think, well, that wasn't me. That was just very serendipitous. It was just a coincidence. And this 2 million in revenue just fell in my lap. That's possible. But it's also possible that you had to figure out new policies, new contracts. You had to rework the business model or the partnership model or the agreement. Maybe there's a memo of understanding that you had to rework and figure strategy behind it in order to make this work or in order to remove a bottleneck that then would allow the 2 million to come in. So think about how the piece that's invisible, right? We can't see another person's thinking. We just know the outcome that came from it. So try to think about how your strategy went into it so that in the bullets, it can show the highest level of complexity, which sometimes can be more strategic than tactical, especially as you move up in your career. Okay. So again, you've stepped away for 24 hours. You come back and look at the bullets that you've came up with, and you're looking for, is this the most relevant version? Is this the most impactful version? Does this demonstrate the highest level of complexity in terms of the work that I've done? And then finally, as you're starting to arrive at a final resume or getting closer to a final resume, you want to ask yourself, as a hiring leader, let's pretend I'm a hiring leader. As I'm looking through this resume, can I see a balanced professional? And can I see a comprehensive list of skill sets and keywords for the role I'm hiring for? And that's often one of the things that's missing. Often, what we see as a hiring leader, let's pretend we're hiring leaders right now. Often, what we see in a resume is, okay, I can see this person has had really great career history, but it's not actually what we're looking for. In the ideal resume, what they would see is, oh my goodness, everything on this resume is exactly what we're looking for. That's what you want your resume to represent. So that's that last review of the resume, is meaning you might have one particular keyword or skill or method like 15 times, and the hiring leader's like, I get it, you used agile. Or the opposite might happen in a different skill that maybe maybe this position requires a lot of cross-functional collaboration and a lot of executive partnership, right? Partnering up with executives on making decisions. And you don't see any of that on your resume. Well, now you realize, oh, my resume is more tactically focused and not as strategically focused, or it's not as focused on the executive communication side of things. So this is where you want to balance it out a little bit more, and also make sure that it includes and showcases a comprehensive list of the skill sets and the keywords needed for the role you're going to be hired for. Okay. This was kind of a dense episode, but I wanted to get this in a recording. I wanted to put it out to you so that if and when you need to work on your resume, you can just pull this up, go through this process, and get your best achievements. Identify your impact, quantify that impact, build out your bullets, and then make sure that your resume is balanced. It has been a pleasure spending time with you today, and I hope you found this helpful. If you did, do me a favor, and if you could rate this on either Spotify or Apple Podcasts as a 5-star podcast, it is going to help get this message out to more people. Again, thank you for spending time. Know that Denise and I are praying for you. We are cheering you on, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. If you found this episode helpful, please tap the 5-star review on the show's homepage in your podcast app. It would absolutely make my day, and it helps others discover the Uncommon Career Podcast. Now, to download your free career resources and learn how I help seasoned professionals land amazing offers in as little as 90 days, click on the link in the description or go to theuncommoncareer.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.